Hello, good evening, and thanks again for another edition of Ideas Exchange. Tonight, we are looking at two things. First, the Weja Dam floods. Last week, we spent time in the communities which were inundated by the flood waters coming out from excess water in the Weja treatment plant. And again, we shall also be playing back an interview the former president, John Dramani Mahama, had with the Voice of America. You remember, he has been in the U.S. for a number of days where he received the Global Leadership and Economic Impact Award during the second annual Networking the Nations CEOs Summit. He has been speaking to the Voice of America just some few minutes ago. I'll be sharing that conversation with you on this program, Ideas Exchange, around 8:30. So stay with us throughout. I just came back from Tetegu. I visited many of the communities affected by the floods. In fact, when I went there, I saw the semblance of traces of the devastation. But it gave us a reflection of something that should bother you, something about a nation that appears not to care much about people whose sweat, whose taxes pay those in authority to fix things and to ensure people live in comfort. That is the picture I saw when I went back to the community. Many of the thousands who were forced to flee their homes are counting their losses with no hope in sight. In fact, they don't know what will happen, and they don't care about somebody coming to support them. But when I was reflecting through what may be worrying those who have lost so much, I began to reflect on what really could have been the reason for what we witnessed in many of the communities which were virtually made ghost towns for at least 4 consecutive days. So I thought about the Ghana Water Company and whether it has questions to answer and why nobody is holding them to account for the manner in which they spilled excess water from the Weja Dam. I also thought about NADMO, but I know NADMO is virtually hopeless because they don't have funds. They are only there taking salaries, and anytime there's a disaster, they just go around, create the impression that they are assessing the situation, and the support they give victims really are not what the victims want. Bed sheets or mattresses and the likes that you would think about. But there were critical institutions, national security. To what extent were they informed and did they care? The Interior Ministry. I was looking at the Hydrological Services Department, if they cared about the enclave where I will take you to a short while ago. And then I was also thinking about the Water Resources Commission. I thought about several other institutions which, in my opinion, must be held to account. And so you will look at the videos I want to share, and you notice that many of the places I went to, as you will see on your screens, did not look like a community which was devastated by the floods. The water had gone, the place was dry, and everything looked as if things were normal. And so you will see in the video that is playing on the screen now that when I visited the communities, many of the things I wanted to share didn't appear to be what it should be. We'll be taking a break. When we come back, I'll tell you more.
The average human body mass should have at least 60% water for optimal performance in any physical or mental exercise. We can help you maintain it naturally. natural mineral water. Simply natural.
Welcome back. I now have the video I want to share with you, and as you see on the screen, you would notice that many of the communities that I visited did not look like they were areas that had been flooded. The streets are dry, you see the buildings, but you can always see the traces on some of the areas that were flooded, and this is New Wager. And so this stream actually overflew its banks. That is the Densu River. But today, when I went there, everything appeared to be normal. Many people we met in their homes were still counting their losses. They had brought many of the things back. And that is one of the bridges which was virtually covered by flood waters. And while I was packaging this, I decided to bring back the way this place looked like just some few days ago. And you would notice, as the gentleman is walking past, that everything appears, but you can see the traces of the polythene that tells you the level at which the water rose. And today, it is quite safe for anybody to use that bridge. The integrity, we are told, is still very strong. But virtually every part of the areas that we visited today showed signs of devastation. What you see on the screen now was when the water levels started rising. And that same bridge is what you saw a few minutes ago. And you can tell from what we did last week that the situation was very, very dire. People could really not move within that enclave. We were told that no death was recorded. But what we are told is that several buildings had collapsed, several properties were lost, businesses that had goods in their shops have nothing to talk about today as we speak. And many of the people we met as we went around told us that in as much as they saw NADMO in the community, they appeared to be saving lives. They were with the soldiers, the immigration officers, and several other security members, including the police. And what they did was they went to areas which were hard to reach and they managed to rescue people. After that, nothing happened. In that community, I spoke to a number of people. From New Wager, we went to Tetegu, where I spoke to one Godwin Atukpa. He is the opinion leader of that community. He tells me something very interesting. In fact, he gave me an impression of people living in a community who knew so well the potential threat, but still believed that officials of the Ghana Water Company, the District Assembly, government at large, were simply negligent. And you would notice from the report I filed a while ago that there's so much that are still supposed to be taken care of, i.e. measures that will ensure lasting solution to the difficulty we find on the ground. Just listen to that report I filed, which reflects the scene at Weja, Tetegu, Aplaku, and all the communities just a few minutes ago. Right, all the way through Tetegu to join the sea around the Bojo beach area. But just a week after, as we have come, it is obvious that anybody who may even intrude, who may even just visit this community looking for accommodation might assume that obviously there's nothing to show that this place can become flooded. You can look at the topography and then you would notice that it's quite a hilly area, and the valleys are where normally when it rains, water finds its own course, joins the main path of the Densu River towards the sea. But obviously, as we have come to see a week after, thankfully, the water has dried up and many people have come back to their homes. What we have observed is that they have brought out their belongings, and by the kind courtesy of the weather, they are drying them. But what we are picking is that it appears they are on their own. Nobody has come to do assessment, look at the value of the items that have been destroyed, cost it, any conversation around, giving some support to a few people who may have been affected. Thankfully, no death has been reported around this area. There's another section of the New Weja enclave that I visited last week, and you can see from the way the bushes are slipping to have an idea about the pressure that washed through this area. Unfortunately, the place is dry. We went to several places and we realized people are drying their clothes, their belongings and so on. But just within an hour or two, we have noticed that the rains are coming in again, which makes them a bit unsure of how things will look like. If this rain continues, it means many people who are living that close to the river bed may have to relocate again. There's an ECG VRA pylon, and the pylon gives you an indication about how development within this stretch is looking like. You can see this cable that is running. I don't know whether it is for any of the telcos or we have a power cable running through that cable in the water. But you can see that there are pockets of islands that have been created, pockets of foundations that help you to understand that in as much as we all appreciate the lapses in management of the assembly, many people are still recalcitrant. The extreme end, that's the bank of this channel, which is part of the Densu River, is almost gone. And these settlements to tell you that very soon the whole place will be filled up if the assembly doesn't really put its feet on the ground to address this perennial problem. But for the rains, we will just dash into our car and then continue from another place. Yeah, so from New Weja, we move towards Tetegu. And all these areas where you see the cars moving were flooded. When I was there 7 days ago, you could hardly move more than 50 meters from the main road. As soon as you moved beyond the 50-meter stretch, you notice that the water level will come close to your waist. And therefore, all the buildings you see from this stretch all the way towards Old Tetegu were flooded. So this area was virtually a ghost town because many people who could not live above the first floor had to be evacuated or forcibly asked to leave. And so as we moved towards Old Tetegu, we noticed that the water has receded. Many businesses you see on the stretch. And if you follow the conversation, Ghana Water Company and NADMO said or suggested that people have built along the waterway. And because of that, it was difficult for the water to find its path towards the estuary where it enters the sea. But here, we got a different picture. And that created the impression that the people understand why they are there, and officials are perhaps not speaking the truth. To the left, the hill on the extreme end of your shot is Weja. And you can see that almost all the buildings within this enclave, and you will see pockets of water still gradually drying up. The essence of what I am doing now is to help you to have a better picture of how wide the devastation was. In fact, every building you can see in the shot as we speak now was inundated by the flood. And unfortunately, many people have lost many belongings, from vehicles to garages, which are yet to explain to the owners of all those cars which were swallowed by the water. Shops that I will show you along the way when we are living here, everything was consumed by water. And there it is. The rains have stopped, the water levels have dropped, and if you come here, you may hardly believe that just about 4, 5, 6 days ago, it was just a death trap coming to this enclave to visit anyone. the rains are coming, but I'll shortly have a conversation with one of the residents here, and then he will tell me exactly what happened. The rains are coming, but briefly, tell us more about how bad the flood was.
It's very bad. It's very bad. This can be compared to one of the issues that happened somewhere in 1991,
right?
Which is about over 30 years ago. And this one, we think, is a fault of the managers of the dam.
Of the dam. So,
yes,
because of the rains, tell us, how bad was the destruction?
It's too bad that every household in this community was flooded. First time in history that businesses, people were trapped into their houses and all that. It has to take the effort of the youth to go into their houses to, rescue people, and then the support of NADMO.
So till date, have you received any support from NADMO?
No support.
Okay, so unfortunately we have to go. And so we have managed to enter a small eatery. We call it Choba. And I'm sure later I'll get some bagu and akpadechi alo local blogi bamata diala abu. But for the sake of our conversation, I have with me one of the opinion leaders in this community. Now it's raining again. Does it scare you, especially because the water table is still that high and therefore anything can happen?
No, it doesn't scare us. The rain doesn't scare us because here in the community, when it's rain, we don't, even though we don't have drainage system and all that, we don't face any flooding when it's rain. But the major problem we face is the Weja Dam when they spill it. That is the only problem. So the rain is nothing to us. Unlike the way when it's rain, like 30 minutes, 1 hour, you get the whole Accra flooding and all those stuffs. We don't face
it doesn't happen here that much.
No, we don't.
But there's always this perception. We hear authorities, NADMO, assembly people, suggesting that all these buildings are on waterways. That is why the community was flooded. Do you get that impression as a member of this particular community?
Listen, all those perceptions are wrong. You see, when you want to build, it has to be about 100 meters away from the river. And as you can see, from the road across, it tells you nobody is closer to the river. The river has its way. Okay? What happens is that the managers of the dam normally do their mistake and then tend to blame the people living
the developers, those living downstream.
Because one, Tetegu community was founded somewhere in the 1737,
right?
Which is way back about 200.
Okay, come this way.
Which is about more than 200 years before even the dam was built in 1978.
You are suggesting that this community was built in 1735?
Yes,
that's the historical background information.
Yes, and if you compare that to the dam was built 1978, which the community is way older than. And before they built that dam, they came to consult the opinion leaders
in the area.
In the area, and even they entered into an agreement with the Weja chief, which is how do we call him? Antonyami then. Okay, they were supposed to pay some compensation through him because the dam is situated on his land to the people around and the communities downstream. Tetegu is older than all the communities around except Aplaku, Bawe and Weja. So how can you now come and be telling us that this place is not meant for human beings?
So how do people, especially those who have lost so much, developers, properties lost, businesses which are yet to count the losses, how do they feel knowing this historical background information about Tetegu and how old it is, and most especially if they had done a public hearing or the necessary survey, they would have understood the need to create a proper path for the water to be channeled into the sea. But it didn't happen, and you've lost so much. Did NADMO come here, and how are the people feeling now?
Yes, the people around knows the history of this community. That is why most of the people are not even perturbed. Because, look, you are saying this place is not meant for human beings. But as government, how many animals they brought here? how many animals they are rearing here or birds that benefits the country.
I don't understand. If you say how many animals, how many birds, yes, what are you talking about?
Yes, because some of them claim to say this place is a Ramsar site. How can a community that is older than a dam turn into a Ramsar site after building a dam? And then when you talk, they said this place is meant for birds. So ask them how many birds they brought here. And
no, but normally Ramsar site would have meant that there are some migratory birds which may move all the way from US or Russia, and depending on the weather conditions and so on, they may relocate here.
They should just give us the statistic of those birds here, if there is any, and then the human settlement here, whether we pay tax or not. If we don't pay tax, I led this community, and then we were given about 1,500 meters water meters just between 2014 and 2019.
That is connect water to this community.
Households connections. And then you can see electricity here. We have a public school being built. We have a hospital being built by the government. So if this place is not meant for human beings, why are they bringing those necessary amenities? These are some of the questions we need to ask ourselves. But we, the people in this community, always protest and make them know that, look, the problem is not about we staying here. The problem is about you managing the dam very well, because the water that comes into the Weja Dam always comes from Eastern region. So when you know it's raining heavily in Eastern region, yours is to start monitoring Eastern region and see whether the water has gotten into Insawam, which will eventually
enter here, and then they can start opening the spill so gradually.
Yes, you can start opening.
So now that you've lost so much, first of all, you are an opinion leader. You will tell us much about the influence you have in this community. But has NADMO come here? Have you received any support from the assembly?
We've not received any support from the assembly. It took we, the youth leaders, our own efforts and pockets to be able to feed the stranded majority who have to, run to a higher ground, which is only this area. And
so this place was the only area that could save so many lives?
Not even where I parked my car.
It was full?
Everywhere it was
full. I would let the camera pan gradually, so that while we have the conversation, you have an idea about the location of the car, which is the blue Ford vehicle, saloon car, which is parked there, and then the hill, which is towards the bridge, is the only place which appeared to be the high ground where the hundreds who escaped death had to find some comfort. So everybody is back in his home.
Yes, please. We are back in our homes. But I must say a very big thank you to the NADMO. Even though they did not bring us any relief items, they came to support us. They joined hands with the youth of the community to rescue people from their homes and all that. And then they also help us to go and open the estuary, because that is where the major problem is. The maintenance component attached to the dam when it was built is that every 10 years they should dredge the river, because the main depth of the river, which is the 25 feet, will be lost by sand deposit into the river. Now you can't get even 10 feet.
But you speak like a technocrat or somebody who really appreciates the operations here, and especially the management of the dam. Is it because you have worked for GWCL before, or what really makes you speak to the technical issues about the problem that has become an albatross on the necks of everybody?
Seriously, I must say that as a young guy born and grown in a community, I have to follow the historical issues of the community and make sure that things that were not done right has to be done right. And through that, my community engagement and my activism in youth programs and all those stuffs made me gain more grounds, and I was able to appreciate
the challenges. So what do you intend to do? We've spoken to a number of people. Everybody says blame the GWCL, they didn't manage the spillage of the excess water well. We've been to New Wager, we've been to several other communities. Even though they won't speak on camera, that is the impression we get. So what do you intend to do? Would you officially petition the Assembly, petition GWCL, petition government to take another look about this problem before you are caught by surprise again?
Yes, we've done that before. We've petitioned Wijagbawe Municipal Assembly, Ghana Water, Hydrological Service, Coastal Development Agency, and what have you. And they delegated people to this community, which myself, as the then unit committee chairman and the former assembly member, Honorable Asantua, we sat with them. After that, we took them around and even took them to the estuary, where we told them that, look, the estuary has to be open as a permanent entering point into the sea. Because normally when these issues happen, before we'll be pressuring the NADMO to go and open the place. And sometimes when we go, the chief priest and the guns, maybe they will be in their festive season, they will not allow us to open. So you have to pay money and for them to come and perform customary rites and other things. So we made it known to them that the only option is to make that place as a permanent place, like the way Kole Lagoon is, so that when you spill the dam, the water can freely flow into the sea. But this one, normally they will spill the dam when the water got to the point. It doesn't get,
is retreating because of the volume. That is when they open the dam.
That is when it starts coming into the community, because it doesn't get any way to enter.
What we will do, we'll be standing on top of the small bridge, steel bridge, and then I will give you a better picture of how wide the devastation, as far as the households which were affected are, as we speak today. Youth leaders here. Now, for the benefit of those who are following our conversation, who exactly are you?
I'm Mawenyega Godwin Besan Mark Atukpa. I'm born and raised in this community.
And beyond that, have you worked at the district assembly before? Have you been any other official representing your people?
Yes, I was the former unit committee chairman, and then I represented the development and service chairman chair position at the Weja Zonal Council.
Okay, so that means you appreciate exactly what goes into development and challenges like this. Now, for many people who are following our conversation, you would see from where we are just at the base of the bridge, the steel bridge, which connects Tetegu and old and new Tetegu. And the extreme left, you can see the course of the river, which meanders through this area, and then obviously will branch right towards the sea. Now, all these buildings, the understanding we have is that they are most likely to be pulled down. I see some facilities there, like a real estate. How's the community reacting to this threat to pull down the buildings?
You see, I don't normally want to comment on this, but I say all those who normally use those kind of words don't know what they are saying, because look, there is a measurement that you have to leave before building from a river. So when you come here, look at from the river to this point, you have to build or leave about 100 meters before building. As you can see, is there any main building along the river? No. Okay, you can only see containers, but they are not in waterways. This is the real waterway, which nobody has blocked, nobody has touched. So what are they talking about? Which building are they coming to demolish here? They should just point it, one building which is on the waterway, because the river has its source. right from that place.
No, but maybe the cameras may help us. If you look straight ahead of you, you see the public toilet here, and then you see some story buildings at the extreme end. You see coconut trees there, and you see water still yet to dry. Is that not part of the buffer zone around this water body?
From where that building is, before you get into the coconut trees, at the back of the coconut tree is a river. So from that point up to the back of the coconut tree, it's even more than the 100 meters that they required. And then when you go back, you see the story buildings. Those are Sampa valleys. Those story buildings are in Sampa Valley. So we did not build in waterway. I can't see any.
No, but you see, before we wrap up, let's look straight ahead of us. Now, this is the river. Obviously, if you look at the the Makati Hill, and then you look at the Weja Hill, you realize that this is like a valley. Doesn't it bother you that having all these hills around the valley with a water treatment plant that can release so much water gives an indication that in as much as the Tetegu community may be older than the Weja Dam, it's about time human beings adjusted to reality rather than allowing your properties to go waste every other year.
Listen, there are such valleys all across Ghana, right? So are you telling me all the other communities that are below the valleys or high hills should be relocated?
No, but you are begging the point, because in as much as there are several hills and valleys in Ghana, there are just a few of such threats as in the Weja Dam. And that is the reality. Millions of people are benefiting from the Weja Dam.
Let me take you simply just to Ebri. Ebri and Medina and its environs. You know, when it rains, it all comes down to Medina to flood the area from Medina and its environs. So why are they not saying they should not be there? We don't face any problem when it rains, but the only problem we face is the spillage. And all we are saying is that they should manage the spillage very well. They should monitor. You see, working for government is not about you sitting in the office to take big money and then go home. You can't sit in the comfort of your office and say, I work for government. But look, you have to make sure you monitor the situation, the sources of the water that comes into the dam. When you know water is coming, just start spilling so that the one that will come will not give the dam pressure. Even what they are doing or what they just did can easily break the dam. And when it breaks the dam, the whole Accra will get flooded. The whole Accra, nowhere. Because, look, the last time such thing happened in 91, it flooded up to First Light.
Kaneshi?
Yes. The dam did not break. The last time such thing happened, it got to First Light. So we should rather be looking at those who are managing
the Hydrological Services Department, Ghana Water Company Limited, Water Resources Commission, all these strategic departments and agencies, they are sleeping.
They are sleeping on their job. That is what I think. Because even, let me give you just a simple example. 5 days before the spillage, or a week before the spillage, we all heard that Almighty Chebi and Koforidua are flooded. Where are those waters going to come?
They will just come downstream,
coming into the dam. So what were they doing, knowing that that huge volume of water is coming into the dam? What were they doing? Were they monitoring it, or they were sleeping?
So there are chiefs, and that's the concluding remark I want to take from you. There are chiefs not only in Tetegu, there are chiefs in Weja, there are chiefs in Aplaku, there are chiefs wherever was affected. Do you know if they are collectively putting their thoughts together to ensure that they sit down with authorities to bring a lasting solution to this menace?
Yes, as a youth leader, I will not just limit all what we've already done here. I will make sure I forward whatever letter or whatever petition I have now to the chiefs all across downstream so that they will make sure they get in touch with the authorities, and then all these problems are solved. Because looking at the whole thing, the chiefs are not doing much. The chiefs around are not doing much. I don't know if it is because of politics, but me, when it comes to community development, I don't look at politics at any corner. Whether this color blue, color red, I don't look at it. But the community, because whoever I put there, I'm creating a job for the person. You have to better where I also stay before giving you that job. So I don't look at it in a political way. But our chiefs in all the societies, the communities, all across Ghana, should be up and doing. They should know how to stand and say truth to authority. That is the only thing I think they have to do, and then make sure this whole problem is solved.
You know what? I'm very much impressed. When I met you, I never anticipated that you have so much in-depth knowledge and appreciation of the problems in the area. But he ended on a very strong note, that the public servants, the civil servants who are paid by the taxpayer, especially those whose job involves monitoring, assessment, reporting on things you can find going wrong, and advise authorities to take right decisions at the right time, your office space is beyond the comfort of the AC and the furniture you relax on. What you really need to do is to step out and appreciate the fact that those whose sweat generates the income that government uses to pay you are the ones who should benefit from the comfort they have given you and the food they put on your table on daily basis. But if you sleep on the job and hide behind technicalities to assume that the people are ignoramuses, the people are stubborn, and they deserve what has happened, it can only end up that they lose so much, millions of cedis, and nobody compensates them, nobody speaks for them, they suffer living in their own community, and those who actually are benefiting from them are come across as the I don't care kind of human beings who we see as authorities. If you are a chief, rise up to the occasion, speak truth to power. If you are an assemblyman, don't allow politics to cloud what you can do for your people. We'll be back after this break. And so that was the conversation, and we eventually had to leave. And there's a short video at the tail end of the conversation I had, and that was how we left, just looking at the long stretch from the old Tetegu community towards the main road, that's the Accra-Kaswa stretch towards Cape Coast, and that's what you see. So we drove along this stretch, even as it was drizzling, and we still observed that the flood waters were still in the community. And all these things were supervised by an assembly, by the Lands Commission, by government, and you see the quality and the value you can place on the buildings along the stretch. It's an entire modern community, and every home you count on this stretch towards the main road was affected, and that's the main road. So you see the palace facility, and that stretch you see at the T-junction is the main Accra Cape Coast highway, and that is how we wrapped up. And so while I was having the conversation with the gentleman, I felt these are the type of minds we need to work in state institutions. People who are passionate, who understand the geology, or somebody would say the effects of negligence on masses of people. And when I was again listening to him, somebody whispered into my ears, look at this Densu River and how it meanders through the community to the estuary around Bojo Beach, for those of us who live in Accra. And if it were in the Netherlands, China, Germany, name them, UK, that channel would have been one of the beautiful, well-created water bodies that will allow speedboats, that will allow ferries, or any kind of vehicle that moves on water to carry goods from the beach or from the port through the community to the hinterland. But here we are, we've dumped all kinds of things in it, and today it is coming back to haunt us. We'll be taking a break. I told you after the interview with Godwin Atukpa, the opinion leader from Tetegu, and kudos for the excellent conversation I had with you. We'll be speaking briefly to somebody you'd love to hear. That is the former president, John Dramani Mahama. I am not going to do it. We are going to play back an interview he had with the Voice of America. He was actually in the U.S. for, and I'm sure many of us are aware, the Global Leadership and Economic Impact Award during the second annual Networking the Nations CEO Summit. John Mahama spoke to the Voice of America on the topic Ghana's economy, elections, and a Marshall Plan for Africa. Don't go away. That will come up after this break.
Welcome to the Royal Dazzle Event Center. With a lush and well-maintained lawn and garden, you are assured of the best serene and comfortable atmosphere to organize all your family and social events. Live the royal moments here with friends and family. The hosting capacity of 600 to 800 people makes Royal Dazzle the most versatile of places to host weddings, parties, funerals, conferences, concerts, and many more. Create your memories with us. Call us for inquiries on 055-814-8585 or 024-620-2144, or pass by and speak to any of our friendly staff. Locate us at Myjohn, close to Zoom Lion headquarters. Royal Dazzle Event Center, creating memories.
Welcome back. So I'm taking you back to America and to the studios of the Voice of America. I was talking to you about an interview John Dramani Mahama had with the Voice of America just some few minutes ago. And the conversation was about Africa, economy, our elections, and what they call the Marshall Plan. Remember, John Mahama was in the U.S. and he went there to receive an award. This award was given to him by one of the universities, and you can see the pictures on the screen which showed that event, the Global Leadership and Economic Impact Award during the second annual Networking the Nations CEOs Summit. So now we go to the studios of the Voice of America, and that's a brief interview. Let's hear what John Mahama has been telling the world through the lenses of Voice of America.
Mr. John Dramani Mahama, former president of Ghana and the leader of the opposition National Democratic Congress, welcome to the Voice of America. Welcome to Washington.
Thank you, Heidi. Thanks for having me.
Mr. Mahama, we'll start out with what brings you to Washington, what brings you to the United States?
I'll make a quick correction first. I'm former president, and the leader of our party is the chairman of the party. What happens is when we are in opposition, the leadership reverts to the chairman of the party. So I came at the invitation of Liberty University, so I just flew in from Lynchburg, where the university is. I came to participate in the 500 CEO Summit, and I also had the opportunity to address convocation of the university, and then also participate in a program they've introduced about doing business in Africa, where they bring African business people and leaders to talk with American business people about how it is to do business in Africa and what the opportunities there are.
Mr. Mahama, the next presidential election in Ghana will be in 2024. Have you officially thrown your hat in the ring? Do you plan to run again?
No, I haven't, Heidi.
Well, you know, word on the street, let me put it that way.
Well, it's good to keep your opponent guessing. And so even if I'm not running, I'm not going to say I'm not running. So a decision will be taken early next year in the first quarter. That's when we hold our party's primaries for the presidential candidacy. And we'll see.
So at this point, you say you can neither confirm nor deny?
Of course.
Well, sir, you know, turning to the situation in the country, and you have been very outspoken about the economic turmoil that you are seeing in Ghana. The country is enduring deep economic problems, rampant inflation. Now, of course, this is not unique to Ghana. We're seeing this globally. But we saw protests in the country in June against the high cost of living. And you've, for a long time, called on the government to accept assistance from the IMF. It has now changed course and has turned to the International Monetary Fund for help. But Mr. Mahama, you also came under fire about how you handled the economy during your tenure. Should you run for president, should you have a chance to lead your country again, what would you do differently that you didn't do the first time around? What would you do differently next time?
I'll just say something a little bit to look at the two circumstances under which we went into the IMF. We are all members of the IMF, and so it's a body we go to when you have some macroeconomic instability. And so at the time I was president, yes, we suffered macroeconomic instability due to two factors, internal and external. External, you get shocked from time to time. We had the commodity price shocks, the slowdown in China. But internally, we overshot our expenditures because we introduced a new wage policy that sought to make the remuneration in the public sector more uniform. And it shot the wage bill far above what we had anticipated. Almost 73% of our revenues was going to pay wages and salaries alone. And so that forced us to go into the IMF. This government has twin problems. One is macroeconomic instability because expenditures far exceed revenues. Revenues are not performing properly. But then the second thing is also that they went on a borrowing spree and they've pushed our debts to levels that are unsustainable. Just recently, the World Bank came and said we had almost 104% of debt to GDP. And so we have twin problems. One, to achieve fiscal consolidation, and two, to bring debts back to sustainable levels. So that's what they're faced with. What I'll do differently, the economy is situated in an environment. It does not exist in isolation. And so there are some things that need to be done to create an environment for the economy to thrive. And some of them are governance issues, strengthening state-owned institutions, the fight against corruption, you know, and so many other things that create the environment for the economy to thrive. I think that if we go into this program and we bring debts back to sustainable levels and we're able to get the bridging facility in order to achieve policy credibility so that investors again feel confident that they can bring their money into Ghana, then we must start from there and maintain that prudence. This should be the last time we go to the IMF. I mean, because going and coming and going and coming, I mean, it's really, it creates a certain instability in the whole system, and it also reduces the faith that people have in our democracy. One of the things that we will do when we come back, that's the NDC. I didn't say I, because we're not sure who will lead us. One of the things that we'll do is to, like I said, strengthen state institutions, strengthen the anti-corruption institutions, but most importantly, look at the Constitution again. We've been operating this Constitution for more than 26 years. And I think that the time has come for us to look at it again and do some tweaking in order that we can have a more a proper constitutional environment in which to grow the economy. And so those are some of the things that we would look at. In 4 years, we have a 4-year term. like they have in America, not like in other countries where they have 5 terms. And
right.
so there's very little you can do in terms of infrastructure. We'll do our best, invest in the health sector, invest in education, invest in the economic infrastructure. But all this must be geared towards creating opportunities for especially young people to be able to realize their full potential, be able to find jobs in the economy. I think that that's what we'll be looking at.
And in your experience, does a loan from the IMF cure all economic ills?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. You see, what happens is you can implement a homegrown fiscal consolidation policy, which is what we wanted to do. But unfortunately, a lot of local and foreign investors, you know, would probably doubt that you can live by the promises that you make, unless you have an institution like the IMF, you know, working together with you, because they know that if you have the IMF supervising, they're going to be marking and making sure that you meet the obligations that you have set out. And that is why an IMF program becomes important. That's why I said it's for policy credibility. You know, once IMF comes and puts a stamp and says, look, we accept what Ghana wants to do, and we're going to walk along with Ghana in order to be able to implement this program that they have brought, then that increases investor confidence, you know, both outside and inside, that you'll be able to achieve the things that you set out. But aside from that, IMF will give you money to show up your foreign reserves, and you need that money to stabilize your currency. And so if government is able to reach accommodation with IMF, which will be dependent on if they're able to reach agreements with our creditors, because of the debt must come to sustainable levels before the IMF will give you a program. And so if they're able to do that, then the IMF will give Ghana is looking for $3 billion. I don't know how much the IMF is going to give, but anything between $1.5 billion and $3 billion would help shore up the reserves.
I mean something similar to what Zambia has.
Yes, exactly. Our situation is similar to Zambia. Zambia had a twin problem, both the debt and fiscal consolidation.
Correct.
And now they've got a program. I think they have had their negotiations for
Correct.
debt sustainability, and I think they're well on their way now. And so Ghana is next. Well,
And they also didn't get the higher figure that they wanted, but, you know, I
but
can
I
understand.
guess their economy is stabilizing quite well. The kwacha has made us one of the best performing currencies in Africa.
Correct, just 2 days after.
Unfortunately, in Africa, in Ghana, we have taken over the mantle of the worst performing currency, not only in Africa, the world.
So another part of taking IMF loans is, of course, the conditions attached, the conditionalities, which many countries and many people in general on the African continent are always wary about. They think IMF conditionalities, cuts in social spending. Would you advise the Ghanaian government to cut, you talked about rampant spending, to cut spending, and where? What kind of spending? Social services?
You know, people think about the IMF in the old sense of what it was. The IMF has gone through a lot of reform. They're not going to come and tell you to cut social spending. They're going to ask you to bring a program. Your revenues are much lower than your expenditure. How are you going to bring it in sync? And you have to tell them where you can cut. And so you are going to cut. They are not going to cut. You get my point? And so if you're spending too much money on something, you have to decide whether you think that is critical expenditure that you want to keep. And you agree with them, we're going to bring the deficit year on year down, the budget deficit down to, let's say, 6%. I'm just assuming that. What do you need to cut to attain 6% budget deficit? That's the program you have to send to the IMF. And when you send it and they agree with you, then that's it. But they are not going to, before they used to impose conditionalities, you have to cut subsidies to education. You have to cut subsidies to healthcare. You have to do so and so. Now they don't do that. They let you determine where you want to cut. And if I have to recommend, I think the first place to cut would be the Office of the President budget, to show the way that, look, I mean, if the President himself is cutting the budget of Office of Government Machinery, then it means everybody must be prepared to make a sacrifice.
I want to turn to some of the electoral politics that have been playing out in Ghana. Mr. Mahama, you have been in politics a long time, and there have now been 2 election cycles in 2012 and 2016 where the current president, Mr. Akufo-Addo, and you have both respectively challenged the election results. What can you say that you and your National Democratic Congress have done over the years to ensure that, you know, the country has a free and fair electoral system to the extent that it instills confidence in people like you and others running for office, that the results are the results and that you believe the results?
Yeah, one of the first things you need is an independent and neutral electoral commission. And I believe that with the change that took place in the leadership of the commission, we don't feel confident that the commission is sufficiently independent and neutral because of certain things that have happened. My party has withdrawn from the Inter-Party Advisory Committee because this current electoral commission said that body is only advisory and they don't need to take the advice of that body. And before, we used to reach consensus in the Inter-Party Advisory Committee. We took decisions by consensus. Now what they've done is resurrect so many small parties, and then as soon as anything comes for discussion, they quickly say, let's vote. And then they have all these parties on the side of the commission and the ruling party, and they vote by majority and say, look, the decision is taken. And so we saw that we're wasting our time in the IPAC. And so we withdrew. There have been discussions to try and bring us back. But you'll be surprised that it is the Electoral Commission that is reluctant to accept those moves to let NDC come back. The Peace Council has invited them for the last 8 months. The Electoral Commission can't find time to sit with the Peace Council and after that have a joint meeting between the two biggest parties so that we can go back to IPAC. They are not interested. And in the last election, a lot of things went wrong. On the pink sheets that we record the results, they did not make allowance for the number of people biometrically registered. And that's why when they were saying, we went to court and they said, why don't you bring your pink sheets? It would have been useless because you bring the pink sheets and there's no recording of the number of people verified. It's only when you have that recording, it must match up with the number of ballots in the box. And so if the Electoral Commission gives you a form that does not make provision for people verified, then what is the need for us putting our fingers on that verification machine? So a lot of things went wrong. We've done our postmortems. We realized that we have to go into the ring with our own referee.
What does that mean?
It means we must take advantage of, you know, the systems that are given for political parties to police the poll. And so it means that we must be extra vigilant at the polling station level, at the collation level, and the final tally level. And so we're going to be much more vigilant than we were in the past. You know, you expect that the commission is neutral, and so there are some things you take for granted. But this time, we're not taking anything for granted. I use that metaphor because of one of our boxing legends, Azuma Nelson. He had a fight with a guy called Jack Fenech, and he lost because he thought the judges were unfair. And so when they asked him, they said, you know, what is it you're going to do different when you go into the ring? He says, I'm taking my referee along, my own referee along. And they asked him, which referee? He said, my fist. I'm going to make, once I knock him down, nobody is going to come and give a judgment, you know, that he won the fight. Yeah.
So, Mr. Mahama, I want to move on a little bit to a more international discussion. A lot of the economic turmoil that we've just been talking about and that we're seeing around the world is, of course, as a result of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. African countries have largely avoided taking sides on the issue. At the United Nations, Ghana, along with Kenya and Gabon, voted to condemn Russia, but then, of course, Ghana abstained on the vote to remove Russia from the UN Human Rights Council. In your view, were those the right decisions made by the current administration?
I think that the world order is changing. You remember, we had the Cold War, and as a result of the Cold War, developing countries formed the non-aligned movement because we didn't want to be seen to be on one side or the other. You know, I think that we're, after the fall of the Iron Curtain, we had a period of globalization, and so, I mean, we thought that with the nuclear dividend and more money available, the reduction in the arms race, you know, things were going to get much better. Unfortunately, it looks like we're creeping into that period again. I think that it's a period of adversity for the whole world because it's triggering a kind of global recession as a result of the tensions that have been created. But at the same time, it must create some opportunities for Africa. China and Russia and I don't know which other countries appear to be on one side, and then the whole Western world is also on the other side. Already in Africa, if we need funding for infrastructure, big infrastructure projects, the place to go is China and the East. Normally, the Western countries would invest in the social sector, in education, in healthcare, and things like that, but not big infrastructural projects. I'll make an exception for the Millennium Compact, which President Bush introduced and which Ghana has benefited from twice. But normally, if you want to do a bridge or a road or a railway or something, often you'll go to the East. At the last G7, the Western countries talked about a 600 billion a fund to assist Africa and other developing countries in terms of infrastructure. I know that the United States has put up the DFC, I think it's the DFC, and they've committed about 100 billion to assist countries in critical, infrastructural projects. So it's an opportunity for us to benefit, in terms of improving our infrastructure. But at the same time, it's an opportunity for us to look within and see what we can do better in terms of trading amongst ourselves. Happily, we've passed the African Continental Free Trade Area. And as I speak, the first commodities are beginning to be exchanged. A shipment of tiles from Ghana, I read this morning, is going to Rwanda. And a shipment of tea is coming from Kenya to Ghana. I mean, that's good news. I mean, we've been advocates of this for so long. We're happy it's happening now. 11% trade amongst ourselves. It's ridiculous. And so we are hoping that this can push trade between ourselves even to 50%, so that we're able to multiply the benefits within the continent, but also get benefits from outside. Africa never got a Marshall Plan. After the war, Europe was rebuilt because America put up big money to rebuild Europe. Africa has never got that opportunity in terms of a Marshall Plan to build our economies and all that.
Do you think Africa there should be a Marshall Plan?
Yes, after slavery, I think there should be a Marshall Plan. I mean, slavery affected the continent very adversely, and I do believe that if a Marshall Plan was put up, and we got the right leadership on the continent, and we do the kinds of things we're doing, trading, building the infrastructure on the continent, we can create a decent existence for our people. I have confidence that Africa is the next, emerging continent, and it's going to be the next frontier for investment and business.
Well, from what they say, from your lips to God's ears. Mr. John Dramani Mahama, the former president of Ghana, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for coming and speaking to us. We do appreciate it very much.
Thanks, Heidi.
And thank you very much, Voice of America, for bringing the curtains down on today's edition of Ideas Exchange. Let's meet next week for another exciting edition.